Today's an opportunity to hear from the various Cape independence groups and how we can go forward and what we can learn. I know that Craig has got some very positive ideas of how we can force a referendum and move towards a referendum within 18 months. Really looking forward to hearing about that too. And of course there'll be opportunities for questions and discussions from the floor. Would you like to start, Phil? As you are the one panel member who's here on time, that may give you some benefit. So, you know, people with hearing problems always sit in the back row and then they complain. They just say, I can't see anything.
I've got sight problems. Where's the back row?
But it's funny how often it does happen. People coming to me after saying, you know, I was in the background, I couldn't hear you, I've got hearing problems. I'm like, well, why don't you sit in the front row? And then, how about switching on your hearing aid?
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's good to be here and nice to see a number of familiar faces. I think, look, it's been a tough election. There's no sugarcoating it. We have to be honest. And I hope it was interesting. We from the Referendum Party had a crazy campaign on election day. I drove right across the province, visiting voting stations along the way. We got into bed quite late, and I woke up, and befitting with my age, for my midnight pee, and saw the first of the results coming in from the voting station, and I knew instantly. By 2 o'clock in the morning. At 6 o'clock I got up and I was writing the press statement to say, right, things haven't gone well, and there was a sort of discussion in our own party sort of saying, no, wait, things might get better. I said, no, we can see exactly how it's going. At the end of the day, we're not going to be that person. We're not going to stand up and say this has been an outstanding success. No, you're looking at it all wrong, because that doesn't help anybody. And I said, look, you know what? The results are coming out whether we like them or not. The most important thing is that we get ahead of this and we actually tell the story, and we're just honest. And one of the things I hope we've done as a party is to say we had a bad election. You know, we had a bad election. We got 5,110 votes in the Western Cape. We expected to get far more than that. And we have to look at that and say, well, what went wrong and how do we go forward? And wishful thinking is not going to help anybody. And I hope that one of the things that we get today, and I get it's an uncomfortable topic, and it's a shame that everybody's not taking part, because what we mustn't engage in now as a movement is wishful thinking. We have to look down the barrel of what happened, and there are a number of things, and there are a number of lessons to be learned. But the first, and I think the first thing we've always said as a party, both the CIAG and the reason we created the Referendum Party, is we said, look, most people who support Cape independence vote for the DA. That is a political reality, and it doesn't matter how much we wish it away. That only one person has the constitutional power to call a referendum. It's the Premier of the Western Cape, and if we don't put political pressure onto the DA, we're not going to get a referendum on Cape independence. And that's why we formed the Referendum Party. It was an intention at the end of our negotiations. We pushed the DA as far as we could in terms of lobbying. We formed this party with the intention of pushing them further, and the net result is we didn't achieve our objective. We didn't create the political leverage that was necessary to force the referendum out of Cape independence. So that's the first point that we just have to recognise. What happened to the Cape independence supporters? They voted for the DA. We haven't finished our research, but that's who they voted for. Hey, Anton. Hey, Jack. Then so that's a critical lesson we've got. The second thing is one of the things we've all called for as independence groups, and all of us, and we all say, why can't we work together? Let's push now. Actually, this election, more than any other election, we did work together, and it's a shame that Cape-Egs are not here, because one of the things it wasn't an easy process for them. It wasn't an easy process for all of us. But in this election, Cape Exit did work with us. Yeah? Everybody on the Cape Exit database was mailed twice by the Freedom Front Plus, twice by the Referendum Party, and I think once by Cape Exit themselves. It may have been twice. So one of the things we have to look down the barrel of this election is that as a movement we actually worked together to try and get people to vote for Cape independence, and they didn't. And that's the second reality that we have to face down. And I hope I'm not starting with doom and gloom, because I don't think this is a doom and gloom story. But actually, we have to look at the things. So we have this issue here that people are at this point in time not willing to vote against the DA and for Cape independence in the numbers that are required for us to achieve Cape independence. And that is a reality. That's the reality we sit with in 2024, and it's going to be the reality we're going to sit with in 2029. So we have to say, what do we do? And I can't sit here and say I've got all of the answers. We've got some suggestions, but I think if we're going to start and have a conversation about what happened, we have to start being honest and realistic about that. And this was an unusual election, we know that. I mean, it's in many ways, it's a slightly surreal experience. You know, we had the DA saying to people for 3 years, listen, vote for us to keep the ANC out, and obviously people have voted for the DA, and now they formed a government with them, and the strength of the DA brand is now people are applauding them and saying, well done, you know, and obviously it's frustrating for those of us who fought against it. So anyway, that's by the by. Here we are. I think we all want to save the Western Cape. If South Africa could be saved, we all love to see it saved too. And you know, from my point of view, I wish this government well. It's not what I would have chosen, but I hope they can make a difference. Our job as a movement is to look beyond that and say, right, well, nothing really fundamentally has changed in the background. We still have this ideological divide. We still have a government that's dominated by the ANC, which the majority of people in the Western Cape have never once voted for. And the reality is that the majority of people in the Western Cape still will favour Cape independence. They haven't stopped believing in Cape independence. There is going to be this period of euphoria. And certainly is one of the things as an organisation, and maybe I'll finish on this for now and let others speak and we can come back later. One of the things that we've had on our mind for a while, the Constitution only empowers one person to call a referendum, the Western Cape Premier. And I think our reality is that we don't think that we have what it takes to create enough political pressure now or in the foreseeable future to force Windy to call a referendum on Cape independence. He's not going to do it. So therefore, one of the things that we started to look at last year, and we said, right, we'll put it to the side until after the elections, is the holding of a private referendum. We can hold the referendum ourselves. We don't need the government to hold the referendum. We can hold a referendum. Now, obviously, there needs to be funding, it needs to be credible, and it absolutely needs to be held at the right time, and now very definitely is not the right time. There's going to be this period of euphoria. But the advantage of a private referendum is that we're not beholding on the government. And we had this idea, we've looked into it, we are confident that it can be done, that it have, and ironically, after the fact, we then, in the research, discovered that a private referendum was held in a province in Italy, Veneto, in 2014. It was successful, and the outcome of that was then the province was forced to call an official referendum shortly afterwards, which it then did do. And the provincial government said, look, well, we simply cannot ignore the outcome of this private referendum. So I think for us, they're the two things we've got, and I think maybe we clearly don't have all the answers. The new government formed yesterday. The elections are only 2 weeks old, and we've started to do some research to understand in greater detail what happened and why people voted. But I think in the takeaway, so if I can start with those three takeaways. One, we all have to look ourselves in the eye as an independence movement and recognise what is going to work and what isn't going to work. And trying to put lipstick on a pig, as the expression goes, is not going to work. We have to accept the realities that we've got. But actually, that doesn't necessarily mean that's doom and gloom. I think the fundamentals stay in place, and I think we have to say, look, we're not going to get the provincial government to call a referendum. We do have the capacity to call a referendum ourselves, and I think from our perspective, that is one of the things that we're going to start moving forward with, and obviously we'll speak to everybody through that process, and I think it'll take some time to get all of the technical aspects in place, and from that point of view, we then also want the timing. Clearly at this point in time it's wrong, but you could imagine if this government collapses and we end up with a rerun of the KZN riots in July 2021, that those kind of circumstances will be absolutely heaven made for us to have that. And our job in the meantime is to be ready to seize that moment, because our opportunities will absolutely come around again. The fundamentals haven't changed, but we have to face the actual political realities, and running away from those is going to help nobody.
Thank you. I must say, congratulations to Fort Craig running an absolutely superb social media campaign. It was phenomenal, and it was very well done. And I don't know that one could have done a much better campaign in terms of social media posts. The videos made were excellent, and certainly well done that. But Napoleon said that a good general should not be unduly elated by victory, nor unduly depressed by defeat. And what he meant was, after any victory, you're vulnerable, because after victory, your troops are celebrating, looting, getting drunk and so on, and the enemy can mount a counterattack and you're vulnerable. On the other hand, don't be too deflated by defeat, because after a defeat, your enemy is celebrating and so on, and you've got the opportunity to do a counterattack. And so right now is the time, not 4 years from now, not 3 years from now with the municipal elections. Right now we need to start to regather and refocus our forces, because we have suffered a setback. We need to admit that and acknowledge it. And our naysayers and critics are busy saying all the negatives right now anyway. That's why this panel discussion is so important, that we reset and refocus our folks, show that we're listening, we're learning, we are improvising, doing what's got to be done. Dr. Corné, welcome. Would you like to please come join us here? I know, but you're part of the panel discussion. So just to remind people, just over a month ago, we had a panel discussion here, and we predicted that after this election, the DA and the ANC would make an alliance. And the amount of people online who DA supporters, that'll never happen. And we've been laughing about the DANC. Well, now it's a factor. We predicted it, and Dr. Corné Mulder also pointed out the fact that there's going to be a quid pro quo where if the DA is part of national government, the ANC is going to be expected to be part of Cape provincial government. And that's not good. That can really be a problem. But nevertheless, there's opportunities here. There's all the people who had blind faith in the DA who should see the DA are not that principled at all. Well, forget it, not that principled. They're not principled at all. And as Jack pointed out last time, our biggest enemy and obstacle to independence in the Western Cape is not the ANC, it's actually the DA. And I think many people who've had blind faith in the DA have got to be at least shocked at this moment. And this is an opportunity for education, it's an opportunity for enlisting more people in the cause. And the more things go bad, the more support for Cape independence grows, like with the KZN Luta Continuo riots. That led to support for Cape Exit just soaring dramatically. And this alliance may not hold. Alliances do collapse, and even if it does hold, people who did support the DA are going to be less enthusiastic. People who voted for the ANC last time, thinking that they were a bulwark against the capitalist, as they say, DA, they're going to be less enthusiastic to vote for the ANC the next time. So the end result of this is the DA may lose votes and the ANC may lose votes in the next election. So there's opportunity now to build the movement solidly. I think there's a lot of opportunity here at this particular moment. So let's hand over to Jack. Jack, interested in your first thoughts and perspectives.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. And Phil and I had a good chat yesterday on the phone. We spoke for almost an hour. And I also want to congratulate the Referendum Party for a fantastic marketing campaign, incredible social media campaign, really, really impressive. And, we've got two major disappointments from this election. One, personally as a voter, I shared that I did vote for the Referendum Party. I hope that Cape Independence would do as well as possible in this election, and I think everyone who had those dreams and hopes were bitterly disappointed. And our second disappointment was obviously with the IEC, who for the very first time in 17 years, we as a political party, the Cape Independence Party, was essentially banned from contesting the elections based on a legal technicality. So we looked at our numbers and our progressive growth from 2007, or rather 2009 was the first national and provincial election that we contested. And our progressive growth up until 2021, and based on the numbers, simply on the votes that we got in 2021, we were convinced that we would be comfortably in contention for getting a seat in this election. So that is bitterly disappointing for us. But just, you know, walking in on what Phil was saying, there's a lot of resonance with where I feel, you know, the movement is now as to, you know, where things were many years ago. And Phil is right. There's going to be more opportunities moving forward. There will be more KZN rise. There will be more catastrophe in this country. And I think some of the disappointments with players in the movement not working together more effectively, with also, Capex at NPC not being here today, and some of the issues that have crept up over the last 3, 4, 5 years have been very disappointing. And what I want to say is there are many different ways to skin a cat. And so, yes, in Phil and my discussions yesterday, a private referendum is absolutely another angle that needs to be taken, and that's an angle that we 100% support, because we're all for decentralization. We're all for people taking power back away from the government, and that would be a fantastic way to do it. So we would certainly support that. As my late father used to say, the key in many things is just getting that first olive out of the jar. And I know any of you like olives, but how many times have you stuck your finger in there, you're trying to get the olives out? As soon as you get that first one out, everything else flows after that. And so my father tried many, this is 93, 94, from the civic angle, to get a petition in place, to get as many signatures as possible, to put pressure on the government at the time to call a referendum on Cape independence. And unfortunately what we saw in around 93, 94 was that you had one totalitarian dictatorship government handing over to another totalitarian dictatorship government. And the negotiations were primarily between the National Party and the ANC. And good parties like the IFP that believe in decentralization were pretty much marginalized through that. Then we had the degradation of South Africa, which was written in stone. If you look at the tripartite alliance, it was simply a step beyond the apartheid alliance. Those words are pretty much synonymous if you look at the political catastrophe of South Africa. And you had the Communist Party, the SACP, and the African National Congress forming forming the ANC. So they were destined to take a pathway of radical political and economic transformation, which has led us to where we are today, which resulted in us in 2007 saying, we see where this is going. We believe that enough damage had already been caused to get people in the Western Cape to wake up and break their allegiance to these old political organizations and take a brave step forward to vote for an organization like ourselves, who were boldly standing for a referendum on Cape independence. And so the pain that all the supporters in the Cape independence movement, the supporters of Cape independence are feeling today as we look back on the 2024 elections is a similar type of disappointment which we have experienced through the last 17 years of fighting this political battle. But what we need to do is not get despondent about this, but rather look at our strengths. And it would be wonderful if people looked at this entire movement in a much more positive way, as going, okay, well, we've got bricklayers, and they're using the house example that Phil likes to use. There's many different ways to build a house, or there's many different people required to build a house. You need bricklayers, you need plumbers, you need the people that put the cement down, you need the interior decorators, etc. And if you look at the Cape independence movement, I think we do have a wonderful array of people that bring different assets to the table. And being frank, very open with Phil in our discussions, what the CIAG and the Referendum Party certainly brought, which has been unparalleled to this point, is an absolutely fantastic social media campaign. Yep. Unfortunately, we didn't see that translate into the elections, which is something that we are more familiar with. It's something we've been doing for 17 years. We've got 2 seats in government, and our numbers show that we would probably have gotten a seat in this election as well. And so it's about getting that first olive out of the jar. And yes, we don't have enough to push the DA into a referendum, but just having one person sitting in Western Cape Parliament or national government, that whenever Steenhuisen steps up and says something ridiculous that will be detrimental to the Cape, or Ramaphosa does something that'll be detrimental to the Cape, you've got that one olive sitting there. You've got that one person that can stand up and say, no, we're not going to stand for this. This is unacceptable. And this is where I've got to take my hat off to Councillor Carl Bowden and Alderman Corin Brainard, who have been doing an amazing job with very little tools at their disposal. It's very difficult fighting the system as they are doing inside the City of Cape Town Council, but it's an important job. And Councillor Bowden has exposed the DA in so many different ways. They absolutely can't stand this man over here because he makes them look so bad. And if we can get one person who believes in Cape independence to sit in the Western Cape Parliament and to sit in national government, to shine a light on the incompetence and the sabotage that the national government and the DA in particular here in the province is unleashing on the innocent people of the Cape. And even though this is common sense to everyone sitting here today and everyone sitting here on the panel, it is very disheartening to see how voters are so wedded to their slave masters that we've seen the DA come through with another emphatic victory to the detriment of the Cape independence movement. But this is why we're here today. I think we have tremendous strengths. We're certainly, as the Cape Independence Party, very excited about the 2026 elections. We're excited about 2029. And even though we might not be in contention to knock the DA underneath 50%, just having a voice in there is a powerful, powerful tool. And that's what we certainly are going to be working towards. And I think that the Freedom Front has got more of a national presence, which I think is great. They can put pressure from a self-determination angle and a referendum angle from a national point of view. And absolutely the CIAG and the Referendum Party are bringing a completely new set of tools to the movement. And if we can also get people like Des Palm and Cape Exit NPC to get more actively involved in unified projects, which there was a good example of it in this election. That was great to see a first time. But I think a little bit more of that moving forward would also be great. So there are obviously disappointments. We're disappointed with the results from a Cape independence perspective. We're disappointed with the IEC for essentially preventing us from having our democratic and political right to contest. But at the same time, we think there are a lot of exciting opportunities which await ahead. And so we're very positive moving forward.
No, for sure. There are. And we must say that it seems the voters voted their fears, not their values. And obviously, who can compete with the DA when it comes to the hundreds of millions of rands that they have in their budget? Do you know how much they had for their budget for the campaigns?
Goodness me. Well, what I can tell you is that when I had a very frank discussion with DA representatives in the 2019 election, the number that I got there was around 1 billion rand. Absolutely unbelievable. And the ANC was 2-point-something billion rand. At that point, it might have been the election, it might have been, I think they were getting funding from Gaddafi, the ANC were, and I'm not sure where the DA was getting their funding, but huge numbers. And it's very difficult to compete with machinery that is that well funded.
Dare we ask what your budget was? Yes, not quite comparable.
No, we're very grateful for the 50 Rand donations and the 100 Rand donations that we get, which really, that's what keeps the wheels moving. So we're tremendously grateful for that.
That is the thing. The DA has phenomenal funding, and they get donations according to Corné Mulder. They were getting from George Soros. They're getting funding from international billionaires who've got another agenda, who obviously don't care about the Western Cape. So funding is part of it, obviously. And it's amazing that our people do as well as they do with the little that they've got. But also, the SABC is the voice of the ANC. They've got a very, very unfair advantage, and they vote themselves public taxpayers' money for their fundraising events, for their campaigns as well, which is completely unethical, naturally. Yeah. Nevertheless, here we've got the situation that, remember when the Titanic was sinking, people were not interested in getting on the lifeboats at first, because how can it be safe in this rickety little lifeboat out there? Here we are on this massive boat, this unsinkable boat, and the first few lifeboats that went out were not even half full. And they didn't have enough lifeboats anyway. And the people hesitated. But once the ship started to measurably sink and they could see it sinking, suddenly the scramble for boats got that now they're overflowing, now they're fighting over seats and all of the rest of it. So I think as the SA Titanic goes down, people are going to get more and more enthusiastic about the Cape of Good Hope lifeboat. Dr. Corné Mulder, could we ask you to please come and give your perspective?
Could I say, I want to say, talk to us, but I need to do that after the report. I don't have a problem to speak in front of everybody present.
Yes.
I don't want to do it for it, if possible. So I think...
So we're going to do both. There's first and foremost to have a response that's public, that's out in Loving Life TV and so on, give a view, but then of course there's got to be strategy meetings that should be quiet and private and not recorded. So hopefully we can do both.
Sure.
Would you like to start with a public response?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much.
First of all, my apology for being late. I got home at 1 o'clock this morning from Parliament, and a lot of things happened since then again.
Yes, I have.
I have not got all my thoughts gathered at this stage in terms of what's going on. There's a lot of things happening, and I will just now tell you what I think. What we can do is, I think in terms of the election result, it's quite clear that we did not get the support we hoped for Cape independence. That does not mean for 1 second that we have to abandon what we are busy with. We will never abandon that. Never, ever. And if I may say, just with regard to the results specifically, there is a thinking that says what we now need to do is to internationalize the whole concept of freedom and Cape independence. My first response is you cannot internationalize something that you cannot display support locally. You cannot do that. If, for example, the parties that supported Cape independence now came out with huge support, 40% or whatever the case may be, and the powers to be does not want to listen to you, you've got something to internationalize. But with the results that we've received, for whatever reason, there's nothing to internationalize. It's an interesting theoretical exercise to go out and say, well, we want this, that, and the other. And the response immediately would be, on whose behalf are you talking? Why should we listen to you? I just want to conclude with this. We need to be honest with ourselves. It's no use to think that we've got support for our idea if we cannot demonstrate that practically in this province. What does that mean? It means we have to sit down and plan and think and go back to grassroots level and start to build a broad movement with structures on the ground. You cannot live up in the air and believe people support you and some miracle they will come out on polling day and vote for this idea. They are not doing that. You need to get people on the ground dedicated to the concept, build structures, create visibility, get people involved, not only to support but to contribute also financially and build a strong movement. It's going to take some time. And if I can use just one simple example, which is different from what we are trying to achieve. In the last 14 days, I've had a lot of interaction with the whole Solidarity movement. They've got 550,000 members. Look what they have achieved in South Africa in terms of trade union, in terms of AfriForum. They are talking of a budget of more than a couple of billion per year from their members. No donations from nowhere. 500,000 people in that movement are a real political factor in the moment in South Africa, I can assure you. It's no use for us to say we've got this number of support for our idea, but it's not tangible. We need to start there. And until we can do that, we will not succeed, and we will have nothing to internationalize.
Thank you so very much. Plainly, what the average voter, I think, in the Western Cape was terrified about was what the DA mobilized as the Armageddon scenario. And they terrified people and got people to vote their fears because they looked at what if the EFF and the ANC joined together in a coalition, or MK even, which isn't likely because those characters, they might be involved in a coalition for a few minutes, but it's going to fall apart within a short while. EFF are not team players. They will break up any alliance, and we've seen this with metro coalitions. But the DA managed to persuade a lot of people in the Cape, and the average person is scared of change. And we represent change too. Of course, our change is for the better, but still, the average voter in the Cape is terrified of change. They prefer what they're familiar with and what they're comfortable with. They want the status quo. And that's what the average person votes for. And the DA to them represents status quo. It's what we know and they feel more comfortable with, even though they recognize the DA does not represent their values, especially when it comes to self-determination, referendum, Cape independence. So I don't believe that the vote represented a rejection of Cape independence. As Phil says, the people still support Cape independence. And those hundreds of thousands who signed up for Cape Exit, they obviously believe in Cape independence, but they didn't vote Cape independence. They voted for the DA because they were afraid of an EFF-ANC alliance. So what you saw was people afraid of change and experiencing inertia and voting for the council, voting their fears, not their values. That's going to take quite a lot to change. But as Phil has pointed out, the vast amount of support for Cape independence has proven it's there on the ground in polls, but we've got to go beyond polls. And I think the AfriForum Solidarity model is excellent. They're setting up universities. They are running all kinds of improvements in local communities. They're rebuilding everything from gardens, cleaning up cemeteries, preserving national monuments. They've got a lot of practical things on the ground, and the university and what they're doing to protect education is practical, it's tangible, it's visible. You can walk in, you can see Solidarity are making a difference. AfriForum are very active. So we've got to build up a movement from the ground like that, obviously. Jack.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I'd just like to come in on that and sort of tie some loose strings together. I think we need to not be so negative when we look at this. You know, Phil and I had a conversation at the end of the 2021 elections where he called me up and asked our perspective on the election results, and we're very glad and happy and proud that voters in the Western Cape gave us those 2 seats in government. And there were many people at the time that felt that wasn't good enough, that we should have done better. And we had a very frank discussion back then in those elections also. And I said, Phil, it's not as easy as people think. And so let's ask the question, how many Christians are there living in South Africa? Now you tell me that the ACDP, the only party that stands for Christianity, getting 1% of the vote across South Africa, is that a reflection of Christianity in South Africa? Absolutely not. Another example I gave to Phil was, let's do a poll on how many people in the Western Cape like rugby or cricket. you'll find that number 60, 70%. If we were to start the rugby and cricket party, how many votes would we get in an election? 0. So we need to not cross our wires and understand that Cape independence is absolutely beating in the hearts of the people of the Cape. But there's it's a very different thing and an operation to try and get these people to put an X on a piece of paper for this idea. They want the idea, they support the idea, but politics is a very different beast to sport and social media and all those types of things. So let's not get too despondent on ourselves. Cape independence is absolutely, in all of our experiences, all you need to do is have a conversation with any random person on the side of the road. A good friend of mine, a great journalist, Big Daddy Liberty, Sitle Ngobese, he did an interview with the Referendum Party during the election, which I watched, and there he asked a number of people of all different races, all different classes on the side of the road, and you get a good cross-section of people's opinions. And some of them actually hadn't heard of the idea, but when he presented it to them, they were like, yeah, actually, I like that. I like the idea of Cape independence. So I just want to caution too much negativity and just understand that the political game is a very different and difficult game to fight and to play. And this is where we need to strengthen our toolbox.
Thank you. Certainly, as Jack's mentioned the beast, I'd like to hear Dr. Corné Mulder, who's often called in Parliament the adults in the room, which, being the longest serving member of Parliament, he is. And but as you mentioned, beast, we need to understand this new GNU government. I mean, what kind of wildebeest government have we got actually? So, what the opportunities are forward. Because remembering back in 1999, the National Party campaigned, vote National Party for a strong opposition to the ANC. The National Party won the Western Cape hands down, and then handed over to the ANC, dissolved themselves and amalgamated, and Courtbrook got himself a nice cabinet seat in the ANC, but he betrayed the principle. The National Party killed itself. I would imagine that this GNU wildebeest government is going to weaken support for the ANC amongst its supporters and weaken support for the DA amongst its supporters. So, Dr. Corné, could you speak about the wildebeest coming up now, please?
I would prefer to speak about the wildebeest and what's happening at the moment in the next segment, if I may.
Very good.
I just want to respond to what Jack said with regard to sport. The most popular sport in South Africa is soccer. We had a soccer party. They participated in 2 elections, they got no one elected. As they disappeared.
Exactly.
So that's the one reality. The second reality is, it is true that people may support what we stand for, but it does not show in their political preferences. And the problem is, to succeed in what we want to achieve, you have to demonstrate the support. Not by way of a rally somewhere, not by way of an opinion poll. You succeed when the international community can see and say the majority of the people who wants it, supports it, and it's tangible, there it is. That's the challenge.
Thank you, Corné, and actually that touches very nicely what I was going to say. And I think we have to be looking, I'm just to come back on some general points of these uses. First of all, we have to understand that Cape independence is what we call soft support. And I think that's what we're referring here. So when we hold the polls, people often say the polls aren't real. Those polls cost R250,000 a time. They're scientific. They're exactly the polls that everybody didn't believe for these elections and came exactly right. They're right. Those people are there. But actually, there's a difference between, and it's an example of, do you like rugby? There is, hang on a second, do you support Cape independence? Often those people may not have even engaged in the idea. Yes, they like the idea of Cape independence, but when they come to vote on the voting box, that's not necessarily the number 1 list or number 2 list or number 3 list. It's not high on their priority, and that's something we have to be cognizant of. And I think we I suppose to a certain extent I probably have some slight differences with Jack, but I don't think fundamentally. Look, I certainly from our point of view, and I hope it doesn't come across as despondent, I think there are two things. The other day, for me, I'm only interested in Cape independence for one thing. I'm interested in winning, in delivering it. I'm not here to take part. We're not here to give it a good go, to feel better about ourselves. We want to win. We want to deliver something because fundamentally we've looked around and we've said, if we don't do something, then the future is not good for our families. They're going to be overseas, and actually this wonderful part of the world that's been built up for centuries before we got here is going to be lost. And actually, we're in it to win it. At the end of the day, it doesn't help. So it's not about being despondent, I think, but I think we have to take a really, really good long look at ourselves in the mirror, assess what worked, what didn't work, what are the options, and actually plan to go out and win. I know from our party, I can absolutely promise you, in fact, we put it on the after the election, we had our party, everybody, we literally had a party, with a disappointing result, but it's about what comes next. But the first thing about what comes next is understanding what went wrong and being really, really honest with ourselves and saying, look, that, and I think that's what Corné's alluded to, what just happened isn't going to get it done. So we have to find some way of making a shift change, because what's been, and I think we have created this awareness, and I think that's good, and we're pushing, and I thank for the compliments on our social media team, but I see there's a few of our activists here, and please don't write out what the Referendum Party achieved. I think it's very easy for people to look and say, you did well on social media, and I think we did on social media. The Referendum Party in 6 months manned 60 voting stations right across the Western Cape with teams of 4 or 5 people. We ended up with 90-something branches. So now ultimately that didn't translate into votes, which is a whole different thing. But I mean, at the end of the day, because we all know that social media is not enough. Social media is just part of the game. So I think I agree with a lot of these sentiments here that we have to get people aware of Cape independence. We have to get people actually doing things. We have to have some tangible proof, and I'm glad you made the comment, Corné, about the international route, because that's absolutely our belief too, that the first thing you have to show is that people want it, and if we can't find some way of showing that the people want it, then ultimately you're selling hot air when you go anywhere else. The last one, and I get it, I get the frustration, and I promise you nobody's more frustrated than we are with the DA, but I'm going to keep on cautioning, and I know I take an endless criticism of the day. We have to be really, really careful as a group of people to realise who it is that we're trying to capture, who it is that we're trying to represent, and let's come back to that point in time that the majority, and I think it's one of the things that perhaps we got a bit wrong as the Referendum Party too, the vast majority of people who support Cape independence vote for the DA. If they had an independent Cape, they'd still vote for the DA. And if the Cape independence movement positions itself as a hate group for the DA, we're never going to achieve our objective. So we have to be super careful that every time we get on a podium that we don't stand up to take pot shots at the DA. I think the fair criticism is fair criticism, and we should criticise them. But forget the DA, forget the party, and think in terms of the voters. If we're going to alienate every time we speak the people that we're trying to get to vote for us, then we're not going to do ourselves any justice there. So it's just a word of caution, and that's not the DA. I mean, at the end of the day, I think for me, what the DA has pulled off has been quite remarkable in getting people to vote against the ANC and then patting them back up for forming an alliance with the ANC. But unfortunately, I guess that's politics. But that's just a word of caution. No, perfect. Look, I think there's very little to say. We've said an awful lot. I think, the key thing is this is too important to fail. We've had a setback. We have to learn from that setback and move forward. And and I think that's in our character. We're by nature. We're people who are activists who want to do something. We've probably lost a battle, but we're still going to win the war. And the important thing is we have to learn the lessons, but move forward decisively and positively. And I'm certain that's what we're going to do. And certainly from our point of view, as both the CIAG and the Referendum Party, that's absolutely what we are going to do.
If I may just say, freedom is not a product that you can buy from a shop. And there's no place in the world where you go and you apply and you complete a form. Hereby I apply for freedom, and then somebody rings a bell and suddenly you are free. It doesn't work that way. It's very difficult, it's very hard to attain your freedom. It's easy to lose your freedom. Freedom Front Plus remains committed to freedom. We will never move away from that. Our name is Freedom Front. So we will continue. I've got no doubt, as stronger than ever before. We learned some lessons and we go forward, and the first opportunity to do that is 2026 again.
Thank you.
Absolutely, and to achieve freedom you need perseverance, and we persevered at the Cape Independence Party for 17 years. We intend to be here for another 17 years. Well, hopefully not, actually, hopefully much less than that. We believe when we started in 2007 that Cape Independence was such an obvious necessity that we were going to achieve it within 5 years. So, and absolutely everyone involved at the time also thought, yeah, we're going to get it in the 2009 elections. We're going to make massive inroads in 2011. We're going to definitely get it in the 2014 national provincial elections. And so I think a lot of the disillusionment that some of the newer players to the space are feeling is something that we know very well. And perseverance is something that we are, I think, renowned for, and we're very proud of it. We're very proud of our supporters. We're very proud of the team. I want to say thank you to everyone in the Cape Independence Party who, even though it was disappointing, the IEC, essentially banned a registered political party represented in government from contesting the elections. And we've been through the numbers, and this election was going to be very good for us potentially. So this is heartbreaking, but we're wiser, we're stronger for it, and we're looking forward to 2026. So anyone who is watching, if you want to check us out, get to our website, www.capeexitparty.com. Check us out on our Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, all of our social media, and we look forward to building from here through to 2026 and beyond. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, freedom is never free. It's got to be paid for with sacrifice and hard work. And as Dr. Corné said, it's a lot of hard work. And people who think you can just get freedom without sacrifice and hard work and lots of organization, commitment, feet on the street, door to door, there's a lot of hard work that's got to be done. So I trust that everyone here and who's listening will commit themselves to what can I do? Not why does somebody not do this? And the people who are offering uncalled for advice, this is how you should run your party. It's interesting when we set up our different groups, whether it's Africa Christian Action, Frontline, there's a lot of people who offer you free advice. Why don't you do this and why don't you do that? And it would be better for people saying, what can I do? How can I help? And instead of people just giving you advice of things that they've got no experience in, and which you've probably tried a few times anyway, and it doesn't work or whatever, if they would just say, how can I help? And whether it's distributing leaflets, selling books, putting up posters, there's a lot that we can all do. And conversations, using our social media to forward on and broadcast. There's so many things everyone can do. We've got to be involved. So if you look at the book of Nehemiah in the Bible, Jerusalem's in ruins. The gates have been burned with fire. Nehemiah first gathers information, and he does first-hand research. He does the information. That's the first I, information. The second I is intercession. And then there's involvement. And then there's investment. And then there's implementation of the plans. Book of Nehemiah is a wonderful example of how a few people, highly committed, in a short space of time, through information, intercession, investment, involvement, implementation, managed to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, repair the gates, and build a city that could be free from intimidation and attack. And we've got so much that has to be done in Cape Town and the Western Cape, but the book of Nehemiah gives us biblical strategy for victory. Operation Nehemiah, we can call it. So if we can learn from the successes of the past, learn from the successful secessions of the past, examples of excellence, and have a strategy that can work, I believe working on the fact of the 5%, 15%, 80%. They say 5% of the people make things happen. 15% of people watch things happen. 80% don't have a clue what happened. Now, that's an insulting statistic. It comes from military intelligence. I didn't pick that up. But we must be not those who just watch things happen or who don't have a clue what happened or who criticize those who are trying to do something. It's easy to criticize. Armchair warriors are aplenty. How many people know better than a referee, better than a captain, better than the rugby team players on the field? They could have won the World Cup every time, the people sitting on the grandstands. But to be in the arena, to be scarred with the blood and the scars and the sweat of being involved in the fight, that's a thankless task often. And everyone in the stands thinks they can do a better job than you, but the one who's actually in the arena doing the job or fighting the gladiators or whatever the case may be. And I wouldn't want Dr. Corné's job for anything. I wouldn't want to be in Parliament with all those people. I respect someone who's got the courage and the tenacity to go in and, I'm sure there's a lot of abuse and there's a lot of snide remarks and horrible things said, but one's got to do it. And again, I wouldn't want Jack's job being in City Council, and thank you, Carl, for what you're doing, but we need the people willing to be there. The least we can do is support them. It's a thankless task going into politics, but somebody's got to do it, and somebody's got to represent our interests. And those people who say, I'm not interested in politics, ask them, you can first of all say, well, politics is very interested in you. And anyone who lived through the lockdown lunacy, masquerade madness, COVID cult, salvation by vaccination insanity, knows that the government can even think they can tell you you're not allowed out of your house, you're not allowed to attend church, you're not allowed to gather with your friends, you can't visit your grandparents, you can't visit your wife who's sick in cancer ward in hospital. I mean, who the hell do they think they are? Well, we voted for them, and they think they've got the power to infringe on our lives. You can't run around a field. You can't go out to the beach. The police who couldn't stop crime, and the government who couldn't deal with providing water and electricity, they can stop you going to the beach, they can stop you swimming, they can stop you breathing fresh air. To think, people after that, who can say, I'm not interested in politics? Do you care that the government is taking your money and stealing it? Do you care about the fact that they are now telling your children and grandchildren that they can change their genders and all that sort of nonsense, brainwashing them, comprehensive sexuality education, which is nothing but pornography and child abuse? And this government, whether it's the Bella Bill, whether it's a hate speech bill, they can determine that you saying something like, Jesus is the way, the truth, and life. No one comes to the Father but by me. Well, that could be hate speech. That might offend somebody. You could get into trouble for saying, well, biologically there's only two genders, or marriage can only be between a man and a woman. And now a politician can take away your right to even say what is obvious and axiomatic. So people who didn't vote, and I'm sorry to say, I think the statistics still that more people are eligible to vote than actually register to vote, and more people are registered to vote than actually do vote, and that all those people who say, well, what difference can my vote make? They could actually outnumber the people who did vote, because we've got a lot of eligible people who didn't even bother to register to vote, which includes even people in my family. My elder brother is one of those people who I've never voted. And I meet people all over the world who are proud, I never voted. They think they somehow morally better than the people who actually get out there and do something. It's better to light a candle and to curse the darkness. Absolutely vital that we mobilize people and get them involved. And so to all the Loving Life viewers as well, just to encourage them, get involved. And thank you to South Africans outside of South Africa who took the trouble and queued up in Trafalgar Square at South Africa House, voted, got involved in voting within New Zealand, Canada. It's so important that we all do something. We can't do everything, but everyone can do something. And just to mobilize everyone the best we can. I think with that, we're going to end the broadcast section and then go to an off-camera time of tackling some things more to the point. Thank you very much, Vaughan, for making this possible.